Today we're going to talk about cadence, your running cadence, which is the amount of steps that you take per minute. And despite what you might think, it's actually independent of your running speed. It's actually just how many steps you take per minute, how quickly your feet are turning over. And there's a lot of misinformation about it. Originally, when I first graduated, they said that 180 is the magic number for cadence and that everyone should strive for. But research has shown that's not really the case. In fact, there's a lot of research that studies cadence and shows that it's very correlated with your effort levels, your efficiency, and can also be linked with injury. And if you're inefficient with your cadence, you could be overloading certain structures unnecessarily. Today we're going to dive into the science, talk about what cadence actually is, what is your ideal cadence and why it may not necessarily be that 180 magic number. Hello Run Smarter scholars, thanks for joining me again today. My name is Brodie. I'm here to build up your running IQ so that you can reduce your risk of injury, overcome a current injury, or increase your running performance safely. If that interests you and you like the idea of this channel, hit subscribe and then turn on notifications so that you'll instantly be notified when a new episode comes out and you can find out new ways to train smarter. Now, before we dive into the science of cadence and look at all these publications, I thought it might be a nice start to actually measure your current cadence to see where you're at and if you should increase or decrease and where to go from there. So we'll head into the gym and we'll start investigating. Okay, so we're starting off with the basics because if you're not too sure exactly what your cadence is, there's some really easy things that you can do. First of all, just getting an app, or if you're just linking it to your fitness tracker, it can usually just tell you the average cadence. But what we're going to do is I'm going to jump on my treadmill and we're just going to explore a few things about cadence and get a couple of measurements, see what my cadence is, and then we're going to look at different type of cadence step rates to see exactly what effect it has on the body. On the treadmill now, I'm just about to build up the speed to get to a comfortable, I guess, slow-ish running speed, and then start measuring my real-time cadence. But to do it manually, if you're not recording any of these things, you can use certain apps. Like I use just a metronome app, it's called Soundbrenner. And what it does is you can tap the screen every single step that you make during your run. And it'll automatically just calculate what that cadence is, what that metronome rhythm is. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to build up this speed, tap the screen every single step that I make, and see what the cadence is. Okay, so I'm going about 10 Ks an hour here. I've put the incline up to 1%. 1% on a treadmill kind of just mimics the push off that you get when running overground without a treadmill. And I've just tapped the screen. The metronome's going at 171 and then starts making that buzzing noise, which is kind of at the step rate that I'm going at. But one of the goals of today's session is to actually get you to gain a bit of insight as to what happens when someone runs at a low cadence compared to what happens when someone runs at a high cadence. So I've just set this to 150 beats per minute, and with the camera off to the side, we're going to have a look at the mechanics. I'm going to try and run to this rhythm and we're going to analyze what's happening to the body. So this is me running at 150 cadence in slow-mo. Now, a few observations. One, you can see that my vertical displacement, which is how far up and down I'm traveling, is quite excessive compared to me running at 180 beats per minute, where my up and down motion is just that little bit shorter, which tends to correlate to more efficiency. We're using more of our momentum moving forward rather than up and down. The other thing that's related when moving up and down, rather than it being less efficient, is you're hitting the ground slightly harder. And these ground reaction forces are believed to accumulate quite dramatically when running. And just as a reminder, I'm traveling at the same speed. And like I said at the start of this video, cadence should be relatively independent of running speed. And so what someone does when they change their cadence is they don't speed up or slow down their speed. Instead, they change their step length. So they step They take greater, bigger steps when traveling at a lower cadence. You can see here I'm taking shorter steps as I'm trying to pick up my legs and tick over my legs quicker while traveling at the same speed. Lastly, you'll notice that my natural running rhythm is with a midfoot strike. So when I initially make contact with the ground, it is going to be with a midfoot. So not necessarily a heel striker like most runners. There's nothing wrong with being a heel striker, but I just wanted to go through some research to show what mechanical changes might happen with someone who is a heel striker. So there was a paper conducted by Brian Heiderscheid and colleagues, and the title of the paper was Effects of Step Rate Manipulation on Joint Mechanics During Running. And they took 45 healthy recreational runners, had them run at their natural cadence, then tried to do that 5 to 10% slower, 5 to 10% faster, and then see what happened on the body, still traveling at the same speed, but just manipulating their cadence. This is some data gathered from that paper, and we'll break this down a little bit just for you to understand the mechanics. This is for mainly heel strikers and what happens when you change your cadence. So the first thing here is just looking at the lower limb. We have 3 different shades of color here, which indicates a cadence of 10% less, so a lower cadence, their preferred cadence, and then a 10% increase in their running cadence. So this is mainly talking about the vertical displacement, what they call here center of mass exertion, which is just that up and down motion that I described before. And they say that if your cadence is lower, 10% lower than your preferred, your amplitude is larger. If you've got your preferred, it's sort of in the middle. If you increase your cadence, we can notice that the displacement, the up and down displacement, is shorter. Those who are heel strikers, we have some data a bit lower. We see that if your cadence is a little bit lower, 10% lower, there's a greater distance between your center of mass and where you make contact with the ground. So that's what we call overstriding and can potentially increase the amount of braking force you have on your body. There's nothing wrong with contacting with the heel. However, the further in front of the center of mass, the more inefficient you become. And we can see that as you increase your cadence, that center of mass becomes shorter, that overstride becomes shorter, which increases your efficiency. The second thing that I want to investigate, which was in this paper, is just looking at the graph below here and looking at the energy that was absorbed. So when you hit the ground, when you impact the ground, your body needs to absorb that load, and the amount of energy that you generate. So the push-off phase, how much you're producing during the running. And you can see that if you start to increase your cadence, you'll notice that the amount of energy that you have to absorb becomes less. When we look at the energy that's generated, you can see again that we become more efficient. We're still traveling at the same speed, but we're not working as hard, and so increasing our efficiency. Because if you can travel at the same speed and not use as much energy, you're going to outperform all your competitors or outperform yourself when traveling at an ideal cadence. So now we know that a naturally higher cadence, a little bit above your preferred cadence, is a good thing. But is there a precise number? Is there an ideal cadence that you need to strive for? Unfortunately, the research has shown that it's hard to determine. In fact, it's impossible to determine a specific number for every runner because everyone's so different. Everyone has different mechanics, everyone has different anatomy, different heights. In fact, there was a paper done by Adam 1040 and colleagues, and the title was, Is Cadence Related to Leg Length and Load Rate? And they discovered that those who have longer legs, their preferred cadence is a little bit lower compared to someone who has shorter legs and would be more beneficial, more efficient with a slightly higher cadence. Rest assured, we do have a few guidelines that you can follow as a runner. Usually when it comes to cadence under 160, we tend to find that that's a bit too low for most, for the vast majority of runners that are out there. And if your average cadence is lower than 160, it's probably best that you increase that. And research will show, try increasing that by about 5 to 10%. If someone falls within 60 to 70 of their cadence, that means that you're probably going to be okay, but there might be certain circumstances like injury that you might want to bump it up. If we have someone who's running at a cadence above 170, rarely would we want to increase that. So as a general rule, for most people, anywhere between 165 and 185 should be okay. However, if you want to geek out and really get scientific, there are a few tests that you can do to try and find out your individualized number. To do that, we're going to head back into the gym. We're going to jump on the treadmill and try and go through that test to try and find and identify your ideal cadence. I originally got this idea from Dr. Izzy Moore. She is a researcher particularly into running, and especially when it comes to cadence and running efficiency. I interviewed her on episode 67 of the Run Smarter podcast. And before our interview, she actually sent me a spreadsheet of different cadences to run at and at what different heart rates, or how your heart rate fluctuates with different cadences. So what I've got here, I've got my board that's going to have all the different cadences that I'm going to attempt on the treadmill. I've got my heart rate monitor on. We're going to have a look at my heart rate. We're going to find out how my heart rate starts fluctuating. I might keep it at about 12 Ks per hour, see what we are like with that and see how it affects my heart rate. And yeah, let's have a look at the results. Okay, my treadmill test is done. If I want to be a little bit more scientific, maybe would have warmed up for about 10 minutes or so, but just got a bit of a loose gauge. I also didn't go with every single one of our tests. So this is the cadence and the different cadences I wanted to go at. My heart rate, coincidentally, at 155 cadence was 155 beats per minute. And you can see that in these lower ranges, it stayed at 155. Around 175, it dropped to 152. So actually becoming more efficient around there. But as you can see, the higher I get north of 175, went up to 156, 158. Again, if I want to be a little bit more scientific, really hone in my ideal number, I'd play around with these sort of ranges a little bit. Try it out yourself. Comment below. Do this test and see if you can find your ideal cadence. Comment on your average cadence prior to testing and exactly what your optimal cadence was found out after testing. I'd love to know. Comment below, and I'm looking forward to seeing your results. So I've learned a lot from cadence today, but this is just traveling at one speed. I've done another video on if cadence should change with different speeds, so feel free to check that out. And remember, every new insight brings you one step closer to your next running breakthrough.